What's going on, everyone? Welcome to the Thursday, May 8th edition of the Ship My Money Show. I'm your host, Adam Scherer. You can follow me on Twitter at ShipMyMoney DFS. Only a 4-game slate tonight. We had 4 games this afternoon. Hopefully that slate is going better for you guys than it is for me. I ended up on a lot of Boston, didn't play a lot of the Tigers, have a lot of Bobby Witt, but not a lot of Kansas City overall. Was all in on Bailey Ober, who looked like absolute garbage and was lucky to have any sort of decent game against the O's. Chris Bubich was great. I played Ober mostly instead of him. So it wasn't a good slate for me, but on to tonight. 4-gamer, no Coors Field on this one. The second game of that doubleheader is not included, so it is only a 4-gamer. Should be a pretty interesting one. A lot of totals between 4 and 5 roughly. So a lot of teams, they're going to look pretty similar. So going to go through game by game, talking through what looks good, what doesn't, what I'm getting to, what maybe I wish I was getting to, as usual. So if you have questions, feel free to throw them in chat. Doesn't look like we have any weather concerns on this slate, so that is good to see. So starting with Philadelphia and Tampa Bay. In Tampa. So this is a park that at night has played and is likely to continue to play pretty straight up as far as home runs go. During the day, it has been extremely favorable for hitting. And the reason for that is just the general wind direction in Tampa Bay. This being a minor league stadium, it's not as tall as major league stadiums, so the wind does play a bigger factor than it does in most major league stadiums. But here it should be pretty straight up. You have about a 5 implied run total for the Phillies. You have about a 4 implied run total for Tampa Bay. Jesus Luzardo going for the Phils. Ryan Pepio for Tampa Bay. $9,000 price tag on Luzardo, who's been excellent this year. Pepio only $6,300, so a pretty cheap price tag on him. 31% projected ownership coming into Luzardo, 15% projected ownership coming in to Pepio. Not a good matchup for Pepio, obviously, but he is very, very cheap on a slate where you only have 8 pitchers. So from a talent standpoint, he looks fine. You just have to contend with the difficult matchup. Since the start of last season, he has a 25% strikeout percentage. That is actually the second highest on this slate behind Yamamoto. 8.8% walk percentage, 4.08 xFIP. He's a pretty solid pitcher overall. Again, the problem is just that this Phillies lineup is obviously very dangerous, very good against right-handed pitching so far this season. The Phillies rank 25th in strikeout percentage. They have a 112 WRC plus. Goes without saying that when you are facing a team that has Bryce Harper, Kyle Schwarber, Trey Turner, you have your work cut out for you quite a bit. Bryson Stott leading off here, and then you have Turner, Harper, Schwarber, Castellanos. On the day the Pope was announced, maybe he'll homer. Kepler, Realmuto, Alec Baum. So you have the full-strength Philadelphia lineup here. We saw a lot of watered-down lineups on that early slate, but that's because you had a day game after a night game for all those teams. Here, it's a night game, so you're going to get more normal lineups on this slate, and that's what we're seeing from Philadelphia. As far as Luzardo goes, so starting on the Philly side, Luzardo getting 31% ownership, as I mentioned, and he has been good this year. Going back to the start of last season, 23.5% strikeout percentage, but we have seen his numbers improve so far this season. I lost all of my spreadsheets before the show and didn't realize that they had closed. No, they're there. Okay, so Luzardo, 41 innings pitched so far this year, has actually seen the highest uptick in strikeout percentage versus last year of anybody pitching today. He struck out 21.2% of hitters last year, 27.6% so far this year. Fastball velocity is up 1.2 miles per hour. Stuff plus grade is up 1.2 points. So you have seen an uptick there, and you do get a pretty good strikeout matchup here going up against Tampa Bay as well. One of the lower implied run totals on the slate. So it just looks like a good spot to get to Luzardo. He's in about 25% of my lineups right now. As far as the bats go against Pepio, sorry for the delays here. Everything's just kind of freezing on me. But I am getting to Philadelphia at a similar rate to the field. You have basically 10 to 20% ownership coming into everybody on the Phillies. And for a 4-game slate, I think that's fine. Again, you have about a 5 implied run total here. It looks pretty good. The only team that has a higher implied run total is the Dodgers. There's obviously a ton of talent in this Philadelphia lineup. Not the best matchup against Pepio, but still somebody that does give up some power. 228 expected ISO allowed to lefties so far this year, 181 to righties. Going back to last year, a little bit lower, 158 to lefties, 176 to righties. But again, Pepio is somebody you have to keep in mind too. Used to pitch his home games at Tropicana. Now he is pitching them outside in a minor league stadium. Even if this game does play neutral, it's going to be a better park for hitting home runs than Tropicana Field was. So I do like getting to the Phillies here. And primarily it's the ones that you would expect at the top. Stott, Schwarber, Turner, Real Muto, who is 3,900 catcher, Castellanos, Harper, and then just mixing in some Marsh, Kepler, and Alec Baum. But any of these guys are fine. Goes without saying that Philadelphia looks pretty good overall. In terms of total stack percentage, they are middle of the road for me, showing up fourth most often. As far as five-mans go, they're showing up the third most. So middle of the road stack, right around in line with the field, as I said. On the Tampa Bay side, going up against Luzardo, more difficult matchup for them, but you do get some negative correlation going up against a popular pitcher in Luzardo. As far as for Pepio, 15% projected ownership. I'm getting to 19%. So again, pretty much in line with the field there. I understand why he's getting ownership. He's only 6,300. From a talent standpoint, this is somebody that should probably be closer to 7,500, 8K, somewhere in there. And if he were that price, then you would really care about this matchup against the Phillies and maybe say, well, I don't want to play him at this salary because it's a below average matchup, tough strikeout matchup, dangerous matchup, etc. But if you're going to just preemptively price him down to $6,300, it's going to alleviate not the risk, because obviously he can still just have a terrible game regardless of what his salary is, but it's going to help mitigate some of that risk by at least allowing you to make better lineups around him. So he's showing up in about 19% of my lineups. Offensively, I am getting to Tampa Bay a little bit here. Yandy Diaz in particular showing up about 2x the field for me. He is projected to be the most popular hitter for the Rays, which isn't surprising because he's $3,800. He has first base and third base eligibility. He's probably going to be leading off. I don't think we've gotten this lineup yet, but probably going to be leading off. So he is a good value play on a slate where you only have 8 offenses to choose from. You can see on the screen that he is our highest owned Tampa Bay Ray in the Run the Sims projections, and it's actually by a pretty decent margin over here. Not much of a stolen base projection, but does have a decent home run projection. So I am getting him in about 30% of my lineups, fields at about 16%. Beyond that, everybody's more kind of reasonably owned and being rostered by me. Curtis Mead is very, very cheap, likely to be in the starting lineup, but then does carry pinch hit risk here. But on a 4-game slate, that's not quite as important to me as it would be on a full slate because you just have less other options to get to. You can see here that we have him with a 32% chance of getting pinch hit for. So as a reminder, if you are using the run the Sims projections, which I recommend, if you want to, you can use the link in the description below to sign up for those. But you can see the detailed stat projections for every player, including their pinch hit percentage right on the screen. So if you are trying to make some decisions, maybe you're building by hand, you have a 1v1, whatever it may be, you can see right on the screen there that Curtis Mead does come with significant pinch hit risk. But again, on a 4-game slate, that value, the $2,100 price, just becomes a little bit more useful than it would be on a full slate where you can just find other cheap guys that have a little bit less pinch hit risk. So he's showing up in about 15% of my lineups, about 10% for the field. Chandler Simpson showing up about 15% of the time for me. Plenty of stolen base upside, very, very fast and relatively inexpensive. Morel, I'm getting 11%, which is in line with the field. And then I'm sub 10% on Caballero, Caminero, Walls, and Jansen. The only one of those guys that the field is higher than 10% is 3K Danny Jansen. I do get it. He's 3K flat. He does have some power upside. It's a weak catcher position as usual. So I can understand getting to some Jansen, but he is getting more ownership than I'd be getting to right now, at least. So far this season, Luzardo's been very, very good at limiting power overall. Obviously a limited sample, but a 123 expected ISO allowed to righties, 119 to lefties. One thing that does stand out in his splits, though, is the huge drop-off going from left-handed hitters to right-handed hitters. And obviously that's the split that you would expect, but it's a really big gap. If you go back to the start of last season, 20.3% strikeout percentage against righties compared to 35.1% against lefties. If you go back to 2023 to get an even bigger sample size, 24.5% against righties, 33.2% against lefties. So far this season, he has struck out 45.5% of the left-handed hitters he's faced, he's only struck out 21% of the righties. So you are probably going to get a right-handed heavy Tampa Bay lineup here. And that does lower his strikeout. We did get the lineup. You have two lefties in it, Jonathan Aranda batting cleanup and Cameron Misner batting eighth. Other than that, entirely right-handed lineup. So that does lower the strikeout projection a little bit, even though it is a team that will strike out. Luzardo just hasn't been as dominant at striking out right-handed hitters. He has still been good at getting them out. But that is something to keep in mind as far as his upside in this matchup goes as well. Cincinnati taking on the Braves in Atlanta. About a 5 implied run total for the Braves, between 3.5 and 4 for the Reds. Lowest implied run total on the slate coming in to Cincinnati. Spencer Schwellenbach going for the Braves at an inexplicable $7,700 price tag. Nick Lodolo on the other side at $6,700. Schwellenbach looks fantastic. He is, I believe, he's our highest projected pitcher on the slate. He's only $7,700. This is kind of similar to the Chris Sale spot the other day. Not that I think Schwellenbach is quite as good as Sale, but it's similar in that, Sale was $8,800. Here, Schwellenbach $7,700. And they were the highest projected players on the slate. 50% projected ownership coming into Schwellenbach. I'd be getting the 74 if the slate started right now. I'm just going to have a difficult time getting away from him against a Cincinnati team that has plenty of strikeouts in their lineup. Also a banged up Cincinnati team, so you're getting a little bit weaker lineup than you normally would. Their active roster ranks 11th, tied for 10th in strikeout percentage against right-handed pitching this year. They have a 99 WRC plus, which ranks 21st against right-handed pitching. Austin Hayes on the injured list. Noelvi Marte on the injured list. So just not the best version of this Cincinnati lineup that you could get. Jake Fraley, I think, on the injured list, one way or the other. He's not in the lineup today. So it's a relatively watered down Cincy lineup. You do still, of course, have to deal with Friedel, McLean, De La Cruz at the top. But looks like a very, very good spot for Schwellenbach at 7,700. He's a very good pitcher. He's underpriced, even if this were like a neutral matchup or a tough matchup. But you're getting, an above average matchup here against the Reds. 24.4% strikeout percentage going back to last season, 4.5% walk percentage, 3.31 xFIP. The xFIP over that time is better than every pitcher on this slate other than Yamamoto. The K-BB percentage is better than every pitcher on the slate other than Yamamoto. The K percentage is better than every pitcher other than Yamamoto and Pepio. So just looks very, very good here. And with there only being 8 total pitching options, I don't really have an easy way to get away from Schwellenbach, because the other issue that you run into on a slate of this size, and you always want to keep in mind when you're talking about ownership, that it's not just about, this guy is X percent owned, so that's popular, I don't want to play him. Ideally, if you are moving away from somebody because of ownership, it's because you think their ownership doesn't reflect their actual chances of being a winning play. And in that case, there's probably alternatives that are underrepresented. On a 4-game slate, that becomes a little bit more difficult because anybody that is relatively decent is going to be getting like 10 to 20% ownership at least. Whereas if it's like a 12-game slate, you can get the situation where, maybe Schwellenbach's getting 40% ownership and some other pitcher that projects like 2 points worse is getting, 6%. But here, anybody you'd want to pivot to, it's not like you're getting a really low owned player anyway. Schwellenbach being the highest projected guy on the slate at 7,700 just looks like a huge priority for me, even at the high ownership. Nick Lodolo on the other side, a dangerous matchup for him, obviously going up against Atlanta. They have the 3rd highest implied run total on the slate behind the Phillies and the Dodgers. But I am getting over the field right now on Lodolo. It scares me, but again, lack of alternatives. You have to roster 2 pitchers on DraftKings. There's not a ton that's going to stand out here. He has a 23% strikeout percentage, 4.04 xFIP since the start of last season. So comparable numbers to Pepio, just a little bit worse in terms of strikeouts. But overall, a pretty solid pitcher. He has dealt with some injuries. He also has seen a drop in his Stuff Plus grade so far this year. He's seen a drop in his strikeout numbers. So all of that is concerning. Strikeout percentage last year, 24.7%. So far this year, only 17.8%. Stuff Plus last year was 104.2. In 41 and a third innings pitched this year, it's down to 100.4. So overall, it's still a solid grade, but you always want to be comparing pitchers' baselines to each other because there are some biases in the way that Stuff Plus is calculated. So you don't want to necessarily just say, well, this guy has above average stuff or average stuff when he actually it's that he's a fastball slider guy and stuff plus likes that, but he doesn't necessarily have the best stuff. So comparing it to what he was in the past, you do see the drop off here. It is reflected in his strikeout numbers as well. Taking a quick look back at his matchups so far this season, it's not like it's been horrible matchups for him. It hasn't been the best, but he faced the Giants in his first start. Then he had a tough strikeout matchup with Milwaukee, faced the Giants again, faced the Mariners, the Marlins, Rockies, albeit in cores, and then the Nats. So that drop in strikeout percentage isn't really, it's not like you can just look at this and say like, oh, well, he played the Padres 3 times and then he played the Royals in Kansas City. He has had some matchups where, he should have gotten strikeouts. And to be fair, he did have a game, against Colorado in cores. He struck out 9 in 7 innings. He struck out 6 in 4 2/3 against the Mariners. So you have seen the strikeout upside appear at times, but not to the extent that you would really like to see it. And overall, only striking out about 18% of hitters. All of that being said, 4-game slate, talented pitcher overall. You're going to get some negative correlation as well, since people are likely to go to the Braves here, given their implied run total. And you're getting a very cheap salary on Lodolo. So I don't feel good about it, but if that's a little bit of a stand that I take, I'm perfectly fine with that. Moving over to the bats, starting on the Cincinnati side, again, the lowest implied run total on the slate. Elly De La Cruz, highest projected hitter on Cincinnati, as you would expect, followed by Matt McLain and TJ Friedel. I am not really getting to much of Cincinnati. Neither is the field. I'm actually getting to less of them than the field is. The strongest case for Cincinnati would be simply that Schwellenbach's probably going to be like 50% owned. He might even be more popular. I think one trend across the industry so far this season has been missing on ownership for the highest projected pitchers when they're also some of the best values. Now on the early slate, I think industry ownership was very, very good on Bubic and on Ober. But like with Chris Sale the other day, he was projected around, 35, 40% owned and came in at like 55%. You had, I think, last night, Christopher Sanchez at 7,500 was projected for like 25 to 30% ownership, depending on where you looked. He came in at 45%. So you have seen some big misses like that. And if Schwellenbach were being projected 35 or 40%, I'd be pretty confident it was too low. But there is some chance, that he does end up coming in at like 55, 60% instead of the 45 to 50 that he's currently projected at. So my point here being, that's the strongest argument for going to the Reds, is if they do just happen to have a good game here, you just knocked off 50+% of the field because they all have the same pitcher. But still, I'm not getting to them much. 8% De La Cruz, 7% Matt McLain, my 2 highest owned guys. They're both getting about 10% ownership. Our stolen base projection on De La Cruz is high. In terms of De La Cruz stolen base projections, it's kind of middle of the pack. We've seen him with stolen base projections north of like 0.4 at times this year. Matt McLain can run a little bit. TJ Friedel can run a little bit. But overall, I'm not getting to the Reds at the same clip as the field. For the Braves, Ozzie Albies leading the way at 22% projected ownership. And then you're getting like 10 to 15% ownership coming into most of the rest of the team. Marcell Ozuna, Austin Riley, Matt Olson, Alex Verdugo, Sean Murphy, all in that 10 to 15% range. You can see here we have the highest projection on the team on Austin Riley. Then you get a bit of a drop to Ozzie Albies, a little bit of a drop to Ozuna, and then everybody else comes in behind that. Again, it's not a perfect matchup against Lodolo, but this is also a talented offense. Going back to last season, 2,023 pitches thrown to right-handed hitters for Lodolo, 164 expected ISO, 311 expected WOBA, 23% K percentage. Again, he hasn't been as good so far this year, but at least when he's on, we know he's capable of being at least decent at limiting right-handed power. As far as the players I'm getting to, Austin Riley showing up 14% of the time for me. That's basically the same as the field. I am a little bit lower than the field on Albies at his 22% ownership. I'm only getting to 12%. And then I'm sub 10% on everybody else. Sean Murphy at 8, Ozuna at 5, everybody else below that. Certainly a spot, though, where if you want to play it differently and get to more Braves, that would be perfectly fine. But it's probably a function of a couple of things. I assume that I'm going to be getting a lot of some of the offense in these last 2 games. I haven't actually looked, but then also the fact that I am getting 2x the field on Lodolo as well. Usually if I'm, over market on a pitcher, not always, but usually if I'm over market on a pitcher, I'm probably not going to be getting a ton of the team against him. Toronto taking on the Angels in Anaheim. Good park for hitting, despite the fact that it was very disappointing for the most part last night. I think there was some offense late in the game after I stopped caring at all. But today we have Chris Bassitt taking on Jose Soriano. Bassitt has been solid this year. He is coming in at $8,500. Soriano coming in at $6K. 15% projected ownership to Soriano right now. That's a spot that I'm just not getting to. He's not a bad pitcher. He's not a great pitcher. He's kind of just there. 20.5% K percentage, 9.5% walk percentage. Those numbers aren't great, but he does have a 3.64 xFIP since the start of last season. He's only allowed 0.55 home runs per 9. So he's been good at limiting power, limiting production, preventing runs. All of that's good. And the fact that he's 6K makes him playable. Like, I understand why there's some ownership there, but this Blue Jays team is very, very difficult to strike out. In addition to this being a good park for offense, the Blue Jays active roster this season against right-handed pitching ranks 27th out of the 30 teams in WRC plus, which obviously sucks, but we know that they are a capable offense, at least in terms of, the top and middle of their order, but they also rank 28th in strikeout percentage at 18.5%. We do not have their lineup yet, but assuming that you're getting Bichette, Guerrero, Santander, Springer, that's a good 1 through 4, even though apparently Bo Bichette can no longer hit for any power. George Springer, I guess, just took that ability from Bichette because he's hitting for power now. But we know that's a capable 1 through 4. Dalton Varsho is not bad. Alejandro Kirk's not bad and doesn't strike out a lot. Bottom of the order certainly leaves something to be desired. You may not have Andres Jimenez today either. He pulled his hamstring, I think, yesterday. Might have been a knee, might have been a groin, something in his leg, and left the game early. They said it was precautionary, but remains to be seen if he's going to be in the lineup. If he's not, that would weaken it a little bit. But the point here for me is that with current ownership projections, if you're going to give 15% to Soriano, you're going to give 15% to Pepio, you're going to give 15% to Lodolo. I prefer Lodolo and Pepio. We have them both projected higher. I think they're both more talented. At the very least, they have more strikeout upside, both in their natural ability, but also in their respective matchups, even though it's not a good one for Pepio either. It's not any worse than the Toronto one. And in Lodolo's case, it's going to be a bit better, but they also just have more arm talent, more strikeout upside naturally than Soriano. So you can see here that we have a little bit of a difference between Lodolo, Pepio, and Soriano. They're in the same range, but based on the way that they're projected, what you should actually be seeing is something more in line with 20-ish% Lodolo, 20-ish% Pepio, and then 10% Soriano, something like that. So when you right now, at least, give me 15 across the board, and you say, well, the field just thinks all these guys are the same, the way that I play, I'm going to end up saying, okay, well, then the field can have Soriano, and I'm going to just play Lodolo and Pepio at a higher rate. So if that ownership does change, I would expect to get to a little bit more Soriano, but for right now, I just think he's a little bit of a step behind Pepio and Lodolo as far as those pay down SP2 options go, and so that is costing me most of my exposure to Soriano at the moment. On the other side for Bassitt, I am getting there. 33% projected ownership at 8,500. I'm getting to 39%. We see it every single season, but the Angels are a scary offense, and then Mike Trout gets hurt, and then they're dog shit. And we've already seen it this year. Trout was raking. Now Trout's on the IL. And so now suddenly you have an Angels active roster that trails only Colorado in strikeout percentage against right-handed pitching this year at 26%. They rank 26th out of 30 teams in WRC+. It's not that they have a completely hopeless lineup. They're not the White Sox or something like that. Neto, Shanuel, Ward, Soler, Ohapi, those guys are capable hitters. Yohan Moncada has hit a couple home runs since coming back from injury. Maybe he's going to finally live up to the hype, post hype sleeper. But it's a team that at the very least has a lot of strikeouts and so far has been below average in terms of production. Even if that production does come up and get closer to average, those strikeouts for this team are not going anywhere. And so it looks like a good spot, good strikeout spot, at least for Bassitt, even though the park is scary. You've also seen a little bit of an uptick in strikeout percentage going from 22% last year up to about 25.5% so far this year for Bassitt. Identical stuff plus. Fastball velo is actually down a little bit. So probably some sort of a change in pitch mix is normally what that's going to mean. But he just looks good here at 8,500, especially, again, on a slate where you have limited number of pitchers in general and then limited good pitchers as well. Very happy to get to Bassett. Looking at his matchups so far this year, one other thing that does stand out too, as far as, him actually having an uptick in strikeouts, it hasn't been the easiest strikeout schedule. He faced Baltimore in his first start. He faced the Mets. He faced the Red Sox, the Braves, the Astros, the Yankees, who have not struck out a ton this year so far, and then the Guardians. If you look at what those teams have done against right-handed pitching so far this season, to kind of try and put into context what Bassett has done, the Mets ranked 23rd. The Astros are 12th, 21.8%. The Yankees are 9th at 22%. Red Sox are 8th. So there are more strikeouts here, I guess, than I was expecting. When you talk about those offenses, you don't think about strikeouts as much as I guess they have been striking out so far. But at the very least, it hasn't been like the easiest matchups. Cleveland ranks 21st. So point being, I think Bassett looks good, and this is a good strikeout matchup for him. Offensively, starting with the Toronto side, I am getting a lot of them. Anthony Santander showing up 30% for me. Fields at 16%. Perfectly fine being 2x the field there. He's only 3,800 because he hasn't been good so far this season, but we have a track record of Santander being a good hitter. It's probably going to happen sooner than later. I think that was a bad contract that the Blue Jays gave him. I was glad that the Orioles did not match it, but I don't expect him to just immediately fall off of a cliff. I just think he's not going to be good by the end of it. I assume he's going to end up having a good season this year by the time it's over. Since last season, like I said, Soriano has been good at limiting power. Only a 116 expected ISO to lefties. Only an 18.5% strikeout percentage, though. So I do like that cheap price tag on Santander. He's getting about 16% ownership, so I'm about 2x the field there. Bichette, Jimenez, Varsho, Springer, Guerrero, and Kirk, all getting 10 to 15%. I'm getting 10 to 20% of all of them. I'm getting to a lot of a $2,200 Ernie Clement right now. That's really just like a value holder, placeholder value type guy. It's not that I think Ernie Clement's a great play, but it's what I can get around him. And then you're still going to get, some negative correlation if he happens to do well. So I am looking there for value, but a lot of that probably is in stacks. Of my lineups that have Ernie Clement, 78% of them have at least one other Blue Jay. 24% of them are 5-man Blue Jay stacks. Another 14% are 4-mans. So I'm not using a ton of Ernie Clement one-offs. Mostly I am pairing him with at least one other Blue Jay, and in about half of the cases, a 4 or a 5-man stack. He's not somebody that has a ton of, standalone power or stolen base upside, but I am getting to a lot of him right now as a value play. For the Angels going up against Bassett, I am playing both sides of this one at least a little bit, and so is the field. 10 to 15% projected ownership coming into the right-handed, or not even the right-handed, the better hitters on the Angels. Neto, Soler, Ward, Ohapi, Sean Noel, all pulling 10 to 15% ownership. I'm pretty similar on most guys, but I'm playing a ton of Zach Neto here. He's in 37% of my lineups. He's only 4,200. He gives you some power upside. He gives you stolen base upside as well. So that is something to keep in mind. You can see here, very high stolen base percentage for Neto. So that really speaks to the upside that he gives you. And you see the difference in fantasy point projection between him and everybody else on this team. Similar home run upside to guys like Ward, Soler, Ohapi, but much more stolen base upside. So I like Neto quite a bit. I'm getting to 20% in Ward. He's only 3,200, and I don't think there's any real reason for that. Going back to the start of last season, Chris Bassett has allowed no power whatsoever to righties, sub 100 expected ISO both this season and last season. So, that would be the negative. But when you're just talking about Taylor Ward at that price, since last season against right-handed pitching, Ward has 655 plate appearances, 331 expected WOBA, 207 expected ISO. At the very least, he's, a league average hitter in terms of production. But then when you narrow it down and talk about actual power and home run upside, he's a well above average power hitter at $3,200 against a 30+% owned pitcher. So where you're not getting to Bassett, even though Bassett does give up much more power to lefties than righties. And like I said, gives up basically none to righties. The upside for Ward is still there. But also that is another point in favor of Chris Bassitt when you think about this matchup and the way that this Angels team is constructed and really has been constructed for years. We don't have their lineup yet, but they don't really have left-handed power. Nolan Schanuel is not a power hitter. Moncada may or may not have it. Rengifo sometimes hits for power, sometimes doesn't. But the bulk of this lineup in terms of guys that are likely to do damage, Neto, Soler, Ward, O'Hoppe, even Adele, has power. Those guys are all right-handed. And so the guys that you're most afraid of hitting home runs are at a significant disadvantage against Bassitt. So that is another point in favor of Bassitt. But like I said, I am getting to Ward because he's just so cheap. I'm getting to Neto for the stolen base upside in addition to him being cheap. And then I'm pretty much around the field on most of the rest of this team. I am a little over the field on Kyron Paris, 3,400 MPE. So just kind of a value bat that gives you at least some semblance of upside. I'm a little over the field on Joe Adele, but not prioritizing the team overall. I am prioritizing Neto and to a little bit lesser extent, Taylor Ward. And then finally wrapping things up with the Dodgers taking on the Diamondbacks in Arizona. I hate when Yamamoto pitches because he always has a really high ceiling. He's a very good strikeout pitcher, but I always have trouble getting to him as well because you can't project him to go quite as deep into games as other pitchers at his price point usually. And then here you have a relatively difficult matchup against Arizona as well. So I am curious to see how this ends up playing out for me. But we have Brandon Pfaadt on the mound for the D-backs. We have Yamamoto for the Dodgers. And yeah, not surprisingly, right now at least, I'm not really getting to a 25 to 30% owned Yamamoto. I think that's where a lot of that additional Schwellenbach was coming from when I said that I was basically 25% percentage points north of the field on Schwellenbach. Basically, it looks like I just took what the field's playing Yamamoto and said, I think this should be more Schwellenbach because we have a higher projection on Schwellenbach. He's cheaper and the ownership gap, it's like 2-1, but he's also $2,300 less. I think he's going to be optimal more often. So it's not a comfortable spot, but at 10K in a relatively difficult matchup, I don't mind. I certainly wouldn't mind if I did get Yamamoto. He's really good. He has the highest strikeout percentage on the slate at 29.5%. 2.7 xFIP is very good, well below one home run allowed per 9 innings. All of that looks great, and obviously I would like to be getting him. Also, his strikeout percentage this year is higher than last year so far, 32% this season compared to 28.5% last year. But it's just kind of been a trend in my lineups a lot lately where I'm going, and I think it's because we're frequently seeing these like one or two mid-range pitchers that are underpriced, but then the field is still obviously going to play Yamamoto. So, or, whoever that version is on a given slate, they're going to pay up for whoever the quote unquote best pitcher on the slate is. And I've just been living with these middle range guys. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. But looks like I'm going to be going that route again. But if you have lineups that you like that get to Yamamoto, clearly he's really good. He's the most talented pitcher on the slate. So far this season, the Diamondbacks actually have struck out a decent amount. They rank 14th in strikeout percentage at 21.5%, which is actually higher than I expected it to be. They do rank third in WRC plus against right-handed pitching. This is a scary lineup. So again, you're not getting any sort of discount on Yamamoto. You're paying a premium for the talent. The ownership is there, and that's pushing me away from him. But he is still a good option. One other thing I will say is that when I ran my stuff, I did actually project him slightly higher than our projections, just because I think there's a tendency with the way that we derive our total batters faced / outs projection. Yamamoto is just kind of a weird case where he's kind of had some injuries last year and this year. There's just been different instances of the Dodgers intentionally limiting him, and he's not limited right now. So I did want to make sure that I gave him a little bit of a bump there. But that still, like I said, didn't get him into lineups for me. So yeah, it's scary. Not going to feel good going into that last game without him, but is what it is. On the Diamondback side, Brandon Pfaadt, obviously a difficult matchup for him. He's getting 12% ownership at 8K. He's in 12% of my lineups. The Dodgers are the Dodgers. They have the second best WRC plus against right-handed pitching this year. The only team that's been better is the Mariners. There is some strikeout upside. The Dodgers ranked 6th, actually tied for 5th with the White Sox, with a 23.9% strikeout percentage against right-handed pitching. But anytime you have to face a lineup that we're assuming, is going to have Ohtani, Betts, Freeman, Smith, 1 through 4. It's going to be problematic. And then the bottom of the order, obviously there's a drop off from those 4, but the bottom of the order is not bad either. Brandon Pfaadt is a solid pitcher, though. 23.7% K percentage, ranks only behind Yamamoto, Pepio, and Schwellenbach. 3.57 xFIP is only worse than Yamamoto and Pepio. 18.4 K minus BB percentage. Again, only worse than Yamamoto and Schwellenbach. I meant to say Yamamoto and Schwellenbach last time, not Pepio, but either way, you get the point that, he is one of the most talented arms on this slate. Obviously, the matchup is tough. If this were a better matchup, you'd be getting 30, 35% ownership here because we're dying for something other than Schwellenbach that we can play and feel confident in, other than, I guess, Schwellenbach and Luzardo at their prices. So you would love to get the FOD, but this matchup makes it tough. Still showing up in about 12, 13% of my lineups, though. Offensively, my highest owned hitter on the entire slate, not surprisingly, Shohei Ohtani, 70% of my lineups right now. Usually, I don't like going that heavy on a hitter, but 4-game slate, obviously, it's going to allow you to be a little bit more aggressive just because the opportunity cost is lower. But also the nice thing with Ohtani is just all of the different ways that he can get there, since he does give you relatively high stolen base upside. Obviously, he's one of the best bets to hit a home run on any given slate. So he's getting 32% ownership. He has multi-position eligibility as well. I'm basically 2x the field there. I'm about 1.5x the field on 20% owned Will Smith, getting to 35% at 4,200. 16% ownership coming into Muncy, 11% to Conforto, 17 apiece to Freeman and Betts. I'm pretty close to the field on all of those guys. 10 to 21% ownership on Muncy, Conforto, Betts, Pages, Freeman. Don't have any Rojas or Taylor right now, but I think this is a projected lineup issue where it doesn't look like SaberSim has them in, and our projections did. So like James Outman's getting ownership. He's 2,200. If he's in the lineup, I assume he's going to be a popular value option that you should get to. If Haesung Kim is in the lineup, that's going to be a spot you can go to, assuming that he's in the player pool. He's 2,500. So there's a very good chance that you're actually going to get Kim and Outman here, and that you're going to get some value at the bottom of the Dodgers lineup, which is going to make them look even better. I'm getting to them a lot anyway, but once the lineup situation gets straightened out, I will probably have even more. Overall, they are my highest owned stack. They're my second most used 5-man stack. They're my most used 4-man, my most used 3-man, and my most used 2-man. Obviously, Ohtani driving a lot of that, but it's just a really good offense. Clearly the matchup isn't ideal going up against FOD, but the offense is too good to ignore, especially on a 4-game slate. Since last season, only a 129 expected ISO allowed to lefties for FOD, but he has allowed a 188 expected ISO to righties. Also, you see a pretty drastic split in strikeout percentage, 27.5% against righties compared to only 20.5% against lefties. So far this year, he's actually struck out lefties more than righties, but he's still given up a lot more power to lefties. So it'll be interesting to see how the strikeout numbers end up playing out, but we can pretty confidently say he struggles more with left-handed power. So again, Ohtani looks fantastic. And then if you can get to some Freeman, some Muncy, potentially Outman, that's all going to look pretty good as well. And then on the other side, going up against Yamamoto, even though I'm not getting a lot of him, I'm not getting a ton of the Diamondbacks either. I'm around like 2x the field, but they're not getting a lot of ownership. So it's not like that is putting me in a position where the Diamondbacks are going to make or break my night. Corbin Carroll getting 10% ownership. I'm getting to 20%. Ketel Marte getting 10%. I'm at 15, 7% or less to the rest of the lineup. I have 13% Gabby Moreno, who is day-to-day. He was a late scratch the other day. 11% of a $3,400 Gurriel, 8% on Suarez, 6% on Naylor. So it's a spot where you don't have to play a lot of them to be getting a very good high upside offense at no ownership or very low ownership, especially for a 4-game slate, going up against a popular pitcher. But at the same time, it's not a spot that I need to prioritize because even though I'm not getting a lot of Yamamoto, he is the best pitcher on the slate from a talent standpoint. And in not getting a lot of him, what you're really hoping for, you're not going to the slate saying, well, I think Yamamoto is going to get bombed by the Diamondbacks. You're saying he's 10K and I can get more Shohei Ohtani. I can get more of the Braves. I can get more of the Phillies, the good hitters on the Phillies, the good hitters on the Blue Jays. If I just mix in, Pepio, Schwellenbach, different versions of Pepio, Schwellenbach, Luzardo, and Lodolo at lower price tags, and Bassett at a lower price tag as well at 8,500. So that's the approach I'm taking. But Yamamoto can still go score 20, 21, 22 points. And as long as Schwellenbach, some combination of that group that I mentioned goes out and does their job, you're still in a perfectly fine position given the difference in salary. So it's one of those spots where there's a pretty big window where Yamamoto can be not a great, must-have tournament play, and the Diamondbacks can be not great plays as well. So I am a little bit over the field there, but nothing that stands out as, huge priorities. Corbin Carroll, not surprisingly, the most important, or my highest owned guy there. So again, you can sign up for the Run the Sims projections using the link in the description below. That also does come with access to the browser extension that for Draft Caddy that overlays our projections straight onto your DraftKings lineup page. So that's easy, makes things easier for you if you are hand building, playing a few lineups, trying to make late swaps later on in the night. Also, if that's all that you just want the browser extension that puts the projections right on your screen, we do offer that separately for $10 a month. So you can get that if you are somebody that is only playing a couple of lineups. Doesn't make sense for you to pay to have access to fully detailed projections, the fully downloadable stuff. You don't need all that. You just want the projections on your screen. You can sign up for that as well. So now to recap everything, my highest owned pitchers, Schwellenbach, Bassett, Lodolo, Luzardo are the top four, followed by Pepio and Fod. Yamamoto and Soriano looking like my biggest fades right now, which doesn't make me super comfortable, especially on Yamamoto, but it is what it is. I at least have reasons for it. At catcher, looking at Will Smith, Alejandro Kirk, JT Realmuto. First base, Shohei Ohtani, Yandy Diaz, Vlad Guerrero, Bryce Harper. Second base, getting to Bryson Stott, Curtis Mead, Ketel Marte, Andres Jimenez. Pretty flat at second base. Third base, I'm using Ernie Clement as a punt play a lot. Then I'm getting to Max Muncy, Austin Riley, and Yandy Diaz. Shortstop, getting to Zach Neto, Trey Turner, Mookie Betts. And then in the outfield, getting to more Shohei, Santander, Corbin Carroll, Taylor Ward value, Kyle Schwarber, obviously high-owned option. From a stacking standpoint, overall, Dodgers, Blue Jays, Angels, Phillies, my top four. For five mans, it's Toronto, Dodgers, and Phillies, top three. And then for a home run pick, I will put the projections to work. I'm not going to cheat and say Shohei Ohtani. Going to scroll down a little bit for somebody who is kind of interesting and that I like. I'll stay in that same game, but I'll go Freeman. Again, that left-handed power against Brandon Fod. So give me Freddie Freeman here for a home run pick that is at least not the most obvious one on the slate. That's all I have for you. Thanks again for checking out the video. I will be back again tomorrow. Also a reminder, keep an eye out for the deep dive article. Didn't write it today with the split slate. I just didn't have time. But on most days that will be coming out, it will be free for you to read on the Run the Sim site. I will be tweeting it out each day when I'm done with it. So keep an eye out for that as well. Thanks for checking out the show. Good luck on your lineups tonight. I'll see you back here again tomorrow.